Welcome to Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond.
Welcome to Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond with C. Jared Clark, owner and founder of Clark Law Group. Jared specializes in auto collisions, motorcycle crashes, and personal injury law. Jared is dedicated to helping clients every step of the way. I'm your host, Lisa Mosbey, and today we're talking about what happens if the driver who caused an accident doesn't have insurance in Nevada. Jared, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Jared, to start, how common is it that drivers in Nevada would be involved in an accident with someone who doesn't have insurance?
Well, I know, as we kind of discussed, you know about Las Vegas, right?
I
And
do,
Las
I
Vegas
do.
is just a hub for drivers who are underinsured or uninsured. So to answer your question, it's very, very common. This is a transient city, right? A lot of people driving drunk, things of that nature, but there's a lot of vehicles on the road, and the people are just uninsured. It's pretty sad.
And if someone is injured in a crash and the at-fault driver turns out to be uninsured, what options are still available for recovering compensation?
Yeah, so it's important that that driver has on their policy a benefit called UMUIM. That stands for uninsured motorist slash underinsured motorist benefits. And what that does is protect you in instances just like that. It's either where the driver has no insurance or they have inadequate insurance to cover the full value of your claim.
And then insurance policies often include something called uninsured motorist coverage, which you just mentioned. But what does that coverage do and how can it help after the accident?
So it operates similar to how a liability policy would operate if the other person had liability insurance, where it covers the same things, anything from medical bills to wage loss to loss of earnings, um, pain and suffering, right? Your grief, the inconvenience of having to go to the doctor. So any of those things are considered as relates to liability policy limits or uninsured motorist benefits on your own policy.
And then what about you mentioned medical loss. Did you mention lost wages, damage to the vehicle?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there,
So the damage to the vehicle is under a different coverage called collision, but under the actual uninsured motorist benefits, it's primarily medical bills, lost wages, and pain and suffering are kind of the big three.
okay. And then if someone doesn't have uninsured motorist coverage on their own policy, are there still ways to pursue compensation after the accident?
It's a pretty narrow funnel at that point, right? That's where you're really kind of a rock in a hard spot. We do get creative, and there's different ways sometimes to look at what's called a resident relative provision. So sometimes if you live with a family member, right, if they have uninsured motorists on their separate policy, occasionally, you may have access to that. Now, there's a lot of exclusions in these policies, so sometimes it's excluded, but sometimes we can find coverage in that way as well.
Jared, what challenges tend to come up in these cases when there isn't an insurance company on the other side responsible for paying the claim?
That's one of the toughest jobs that we have is for a client to come in, for us to screen the case, screen the facts, obtain all the relevant information, and then sometimes we do have to turn them away if there's just absolutely no insurance. I say so much of what we do is an education piece where we try to get ahead before these things happen and to make sure that the clients have all the necessary benefits on their insurance policy in the event that they're involved in a situation like this where somebody hits them and there's no insurance or it's a hit and run.
And then what kinds of evidence become especially important when pursuing a claim involving an under or uninsured driver?
You always want to make sure and have some type of law enforcement come out and do a complete investigation, right? Because then we would request a traffic accident report from whatever law enforcement agency it is. And a lot of times they're going to make sure and have the VIN numbers and everything important on the vehicle that caused the accident. And then we could do our due diligence. And sometimes we hire a private investigator to simply, confirm that there's indeed no insurance on the other side. We can also contact DMV to confirm as well. So I would say the most important thing is making sure the officers come out and do an investigation because there's so many important pieces in that traffic accident report that allows us to run through certain vendors to make sure that there's absolutely no coverage available.
And in some states, police officers don't come out and do traffic reports, or maybe on private property, there might not be. Can you speak a little bit to that? When you're in that situation, always call, but if they don't come to that location, what are your other options?
That's very true. Sadly, Nevada is one of those states where, unless a crime took place on private property, the officers are not coming out. They're going to advise you to exchange insurance information and go about your way. When that happens, it's important for you to kind of step into the officer's shoes to get as much information as you can, right? Get the driver's license of the other vehicle. If there's no proof of insurance, I would take a picture of the VIN number, maybe in front, the license plate, any property damage and things of that nature. But as much identifying information as you can, that so that way we could be supplied and reach out to our vendors and private investigators just to see, double confirm that there's no coverage on the case.
And then what steps can drivers in Nevada take with their own insurance policies to better protect themselves before an accident ever happens?
We have to be proactive, right? It's like preventative medicine, right? Eat healthy, work out, exercise, get some vitamin D, things of that nature, and you're gonna mitigate, your chances of getting illnesses. It's the same. I mean, as I mentioned, there's so many people on the road that are uninsured or underinsured. We could prevent this. Call your agent, run through your benefits, make sure that you have all the important benefits. Uninsured motorist is one of the most important ones, but it's not the only one, right? But you want to make sure that you have that, and that way you and your family are protected if and when this incident comes about.
Let's talk a little bit about limits. I know that a lot of folks go with just the minimal limits, but there is a reason that higher limits are available. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yes, the limits are very important. I recommend at a base level that everybody has at least $100,000 worth of liability limits as well as uninsured motorist limits. That's the amount that you will be able to recover through that insurance company in the event that you're injured. In the state of Nevada, there's a minimal policy limit requirement of $25,000. Oftentimes, depending on what type of injuries you have, that is not adequate, especially if the other person is, not covered. You want to make sure that you have the max amount available that we could go through yours to get the medical care you need. God forbid it's a serious injury, a brain injury, or some type of surgery you may need. It's nice to make sure that coverage is there.
And another one that pops into mind is if there is no insurance and there is nobody to go after, and you sit down with those folks, do they have any recourse, maybe in a civil lawsuit, to go after the other party if they had no insurance and there's no other way to get compensated? Or is it just you're out of luck and you have to take care of things yourself?
In typical lawyer fashion, the response to that is it depends,
Yes, we
right?
get that a lot.
Right, it depends. Some of our favorite words to say, but it really is true. Sometimes it may make sense, if that person appears to have a significant amount of assets, that's a scenario that may make sense. But then again, oftentimes when they have significant amount of assets, usually they're properly covered, But if it's someone that appears that doesn't have anything, no assets, no homes, not a successful business, you could go and get a verdict all day, but collecting on that verdict may render impossible.
All right, here's the wrap up question. So take everything that we talked about here and apply it for me. For someone who discovers the other driver has no insurance after a crash, what should they focus on doing next to protect both their health and their legal options? Walk us through a scenario. Maybe you have a real life example that you can use for us.
Yeah, so I think immediately you should contact law enforcement. And if they could come and do a report, that's awesome. If they can't, now you're going to want to capture all that identifying information, driver's license, proof of registration, the VIN number, etc. After you have that, that's when you're going to want to call a lawyer to learn of your rights, right? Oftentimes we will request the police report on our client's behalf, even sometimes when we don't sign them up, just as kind of a pre-investigation type process. We request that at no cost to them. And then once that comes in, sometimes we know, hey, there is some insurance. There's not any insurance. Sometimes we will send a letter over to the at fault driver asking if they live with any family members, because as I mentioned, that resident relative provision, it applies for the liability insurance as well as the uninsured motorist insurance, right? So let's say he lives with his mom or she lives with his mom, and they have a state farm policy and they have $100,000 worth of liability coverage. Sometimes that can apply as well. So it really is a kind of a case by case scenario. But I would say right after you gather all the information, contact a lawyer. That way we can screen everything properly and we can get to work on your behalf to see if there's anything there.
Perfect. And I think we'll wrap it up there. Why don't you share with our audience where they can get in touch with you? How do they reach out if they need to have a conversation or would like to set up a consult with you?
Yes, Clark Law Group. We're based here in Las Vegas, Nevada. We are on Facebook, Clark Law Group. We are also on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is Clark Law Group. Our office line is 702-330-3272. And you can find us online website at injuryattorneyvegas.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Jared. That's it for today's episode of Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond with C. Jared Clark. He gave you the contact information, but I'll share it one more time to connect with him and his team at Clark Law Group. Visit injuryattorneyvegas.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you know of somebody who could use this information, please share the episode with them, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.